Hello and welcome to PlayStation Rumble, a podcast where each episode we are going to dive into the vast and expansive archives that is the PlayStation library to unearth one game at a time. My name is Jamie, and joining me through the cavernous backlogs of video game history is the one and only Tony.
Howdy.
Also joining me is the real deal, it's Mr. Neal.
Hello.
Gentlemen, episode 1, we have a fantastic spooky themed game this episode. We're going to be playing Deadly Premonition. But before we get into that, I thought we would stop and talk about what we want to achieve with this podcast. It's the first episode, a brand new horizon. Who wants to have a whack at that?
Millions of listeners and billions of dollars.
Tony, have you got any less superficial desires for the podcast?
I just want to have fun, explore, the library of games with everybody, and hopefully everyone will partake with us on this little journey of ours.
Yes. So I think one of the hopes we have for this is we will announce at the end of every episode the game we're going to play for next episode, and we're going to basically treat it like a book club for games. So if you're listening at home, you can play the game and then join us for a discussion. And by join us, I mean listen to us and not participate. So let's talk about what sort of games we would like to play for it, because obviously I think there's a lot of criteria that we've discussed when we were thinking about what games that we're going to pick for this podcast. We're primarily a PlayStation podcast, but we're going to be looking at games from the whole history of PlayStation 1 through to 4, maybe some PSP, PS Vita. You both have a Vita, haven't you?
I do not.
I have a PS TV.
PS TV, nice.
And I could, there's ways to play PSP games on it.
Yes, if only the PS TV allowed you to actually play any PS Vita games, because they were strangely all like whitelisted, weren't they?
Yeah, but you can, it's easily handled too with a little jailbreaking.
Oh.
You can get around that, mostly.
We'll pretend we didn't hear that, hey? Because I know Sony is obviously listening. Yes, and what about, does anyone have any thoughts on what sort of games that we're going to be playing for the podcast?
100-hour JRPGs.
I think it's probably fair to say, Neil, that you're like the RPG guy, aren't you? That's where your sort of interests lie predominantly.
That is fair to say.
And what about yourself, Tony? What games take your interest?
Any really, but I'm more of an action-adventure type of guy.
Very nice.
But, I'm down for whatever. I have a whole bunch of games I've never even touched. I can provide that. I'm ready to explore.
Yes, and I think that is probably another motive for creating the podcast is, I think most people, we're all video game collectors as well, particularly of physical media. And I think if you're a collector or even just someone who buys games, a few games a year, you can get that sort of huge backlog of shame and guilt that you never play. And I think this is a good chance to blow through some of those games, maybe play some games that are missing from our sort of knowledge of video games. Like I've never played a Final Fantasy game before. That's a crying shame. I hear they're quite good.
Shame.
I've never played a what we were talking about just before the show. I've never played a Fallout game. I hear they're quite good. Some of them, some not as much.
Most of them, there's a large variety of quality, perhaps depending on your tastes. But
yeah, so that's it. Discovering games we haven't played before, maybe introducing games to each other that we particularly like. And they don't have to be like outstanding games. The game we're going to be playing this week, or talking about this week, is certainly has a divisive opinions about its quality, but certainly just like games of note, games that we think are interesting for whatever reason. We're going to be releasing twice a month on the 15th and the 29th of every month. So let's move on to our first section of our first episode. It's What's New. And we're going to talk about how weeks have gone in the gaming world. So who would like to start?
Me personally, I've jumped back into the Monster Hunter world. I've been kind of had the urge to play that again. And just doing a Halloween thing. I haven't really been playing much games besides that, and I watch my little horror movies and everything just to get in the spirit of the season.
So, Tony, we were just talking about games we have vast gaps of knowledge about. I've never played a Monster Hunter's World or Monster Hunter's game ever. So explain to me, the novice, what is a Monster Hunter's game?
Basically, you go on treks you go out and hunt down giant monsters. But there's much more to that. There's a lot of exploring, getting to know the lay of the land, temperaments of the monsters. There's a large variety of weapons you can choose from. You generally have to mess with all of them to see which one fits your gameplay. There is a bit of a learning curve, but the world, it's not as steep as the older ones. Because I remember I tried jumping into one of the older ones, and I literally had to sit down with a guide to really get into the nitty-gritty of things, because if you just go in blind, you're going to have a very hard time.
I think that's what's always been a bit daunting about them. They don't look like games that are intentionally trying to onboard a new audience. They're like, do you like this very complex, intricate system of gameplay mechanics? And have you played the last 18,000 games?
I mean, Monster Hunter World, like I said, it's a lot more streamlined. It's a lot easier to get into. It's not as a lot of quality of life. There's a lot of quality of life improvements added. That I'm not a hardcore Monster Hunter fan, but I know a lot of the old school players don't really like the changes. But I think if you're new to the series and you just want to jump into one, just check them out. I definitely recommend Monster Hunter World.
Neil, how's your week been?
Pretty slow. I'm just playing or replaying through a bit of Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, the remastered version, just to psych myself up for the upcoming Shin Megami Tensei 5 on another platform.
There are other platforms.
There are.
Are they basically like similar to Persona in their gameplay, or are they like a completely different deal? Because I've never played any of the series.
Somewhat similar, yes. You do recruit infused demons, like in Persona. People say that they're more difficult than Persona. I don't think so. The topic matter is maybe a little darker. Occasionally you do things like, say, kill God. So it's a little different from Persona, but,
Well, literally kill God.
You kind of.
Fair shout.
So, speaking of gaming, you have any yet?
I have, as I try every week, been buying more games than I should. And this week I have bought 2 fighting games for the PlayStation 1. My PlayStation 1 collection is really lacking because I got into collecting late and they're quite expensive now. Can you guess one? What sort of fighting game do you reckon I bought on PS1?
Tekken 3.
More like a Tekken.
Yeah, Tekken 3. I bought Tekken 3 because I didn't have Tekken 3, which is, I think, literally a crime in the retro gaming collecting universe. I bought Tekken 3 and I bought The Simpsons Wrestling. 2 very, very different games in terms of quality and narrative. Tekken 3 is, I don't know when the last time either of you played it, but it's one of those games where like all of the gameplay still holds up today, and that's saying a lot for a game that's 20 plus years old now. And I'm sure, I've played Tekken 7, but I'm not like massive on fighting games. And I'm sure there's lots of Tekken fans that would say like 3 has like, it's very undeveloped in terms of what it would become later on. But you can sit down and play Tekken 3 with your friends today and bust on Eddie Guerrero because no one's got time to actually learn real combos and just have like a really good time. Were you into Tekken back in the day?
I was.
Who was your main?
So yes, I did play Tekken 3 a lot, played Tekken Tag a lot.
Tekken Tag was amazing.
I love Tekken Tag. Tekken 5 and Tekken Tag 2.
Who did you play? Who did you play as in Tekken 3?
Tekken 3, probably Eddie, or maybe I'm trying to remember his name. Brian.
Brian, yeah. I think Eddie, you're going to have a lot of fun with. You don't really have to learn too much about the game. You can just start doing cartwheels. That's very appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Brian was like a really sort of powerhouse, wasn't he?
Yes.
And I quite like Paul. Paul Phoenix was his name, wasn't it? The crazy hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've really been enjoying that. And I bought, obviously, Simpsons Wrestling.
Why?
Did anyone play Simpson Wrestling? Yeah, I literally spent actual money on it. Did anyone play it back in the day?
No.
Absolutely not.
Oh, guys, you missed out. It was amazing. No, it is truly maybe the worst wrestling game on the PlayStation. I think sometimes when you're younger, you don't consciously realize a game is bad, but you kind of know it's bad. You're not really excited about it. And this game was bad. Like, it was very low effort. It looked awful. Yeah, just a truly, truly horrible experience. So I thought to myself, I'll get that. And I did. So,
decided to treat yourself?
Yeah. Well, what's the opposite of a treat? It's Halloween, isn't it? I tricked myself. Good. And then I went outside my house and threw eggs at my window. So it's just been a great week all round. What else? Of course, the Uncharted trailer has dropped at time of recording.
I have mixed feelings of the trailer. I think Mark Wahlberg looks more like Nathan Drake than Tom Holland ever will in his entire life.
Hot take.
But I thought Chloe looked the part, so I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. I mean, putting the association with the game series aside, it looks like it could be a fun little action movie. So, hopefully we won't get can't be any worse than some of those Resident Evil movies or like the Max Payne movie that Mark Wahlberg was in. So we'll see how it turns out.
God, the Resident Evil films were so bad, weren't they? Yeah, what about you, Neil? Are you an Uncharted fan?
I am. I have played all of the games. The trailer was rubbish. As far as the casting, Marky Mark as Sully, I cannot and will not accept. I noticed that they seem to do a big part of Uncharted 3. Like, the plane sequence was in the trailer.
Now, come on, did you not think that looked pretty good?
It did, but it's more fun playing it.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes you kind of think, why are they making movie versions of these games? These are really good games, but I suppose PlayStation's going hard on the sort of PlayStation Studio thing at the moment, and it is money. But yeah, the plane sequence, I was really happy to see that, because I think as a fan you're going, that's a little nod, isn't it, to the games? We all like that. And also it shows that they are indeed going to do that sort of impossible Nathan Drake jumping and climbing, where he seems to sort of defeat gravity and sort of hops around all over the place.
But I think they've changed it. I think they've changed, at least that's the impression I got from the trailer, that they've changed the time that him and Sully meet from Uncharted 3 for the movie.
Yes, I think they're going for their own canon. But maybe that's for the best, because if you play it too close to the game narrative, you're always going to get people sort of comparing it. I mean, people are going to compare it anyway. But I think they're sort of trying to create their own canon for the Uncharted series.
We'll see, I guess. I
mean, I liked it. I'm gonna go for it too.
I think you like it, JD.
Yeah, I really liked it. I really liked it because I think they got a lot of things right. Nathan Drake, I mean, whatever you think about the casting, Drake and Sully's chemistry, that kind of nearly slightly flirty, jokey chemistry seems to be there. I think one bit particularly where they're in a room, obviously sort of doing a undercover thing, and Drake just goes to touch his ear to talk in that sort of very classic, it's going to come up in the game we're going to talk about in a minute, but to sort of talk through his earpiece, and Sully goes, "Don't do that, you look like an idiot." I mean, it has those sort of little moments that are funny and sort of has that humour of the Uncharted series. I think you're right in the way that they got... Chloe looks like Chloe. That's amazing. Sully, no moustache. Is that going to fly?
Actually, I think, I saw comments about it, and I guess people had saw that, like, you see a bit in the trailer where he does have a mustache, so... For those who are so concerned about a mustache, apparently he is going to have one eventually at some point in the movie.
I think as an Uncharted fan, I speak for us all and say we're all very concerned about Sully's moustache.
I mean, at the very least, it's needs some very fun action set pieces, which I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yes. And Neil, will you go and see it in the cinema, or are you giving it a hard pass?
Undecided right now. Maybe I'll wait for reviews.
All right. Anything else in the news anyone wants to bring up?
GTA collection.
The GTA trilogy.
Trailer dropped today for it. Everybody's watched it, I think.
Yep.
I saw it.
What did you think of the new cartoon-ish graphics?
I mean, I saw a lot of complaints about that, but I mean, for a game that way you can shoot off limbs and you can see someone hopping away with one leg, I think it's more or less appropriate, I guess. I mean, I'm more concerned about the soundtracks.
Yeah.
I think even I guess it'll be good for the younger generations that missed out on these games, but I think for people who grew up with them, there might be some. I've always seen some hesitation and disappointment about it. You could always, especially if you have the PC versions already, and you can just, there's mods that make it look more or less just the same, or if not a little bit better. But I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and see how it looks when it's finally released.
Yeah, pretty much agree with Tony. I'm fine with the graphical changes. It actually reminded me a little bit of Saints Row. I was surprised. But yeah, I'm waiting to see what the soundtracks are. I can't imagine them cutting a lot out of GTA 3. But I'm waiting to see if and what content is cut out as far as dialogue and that sort of thing, if they cut any of that out.
Yeah, I think you've made some really good points there. I think obviously, like the soundtrack, if anyone has the budget to go back and relicense all those games, it's got to be Rockstar. And they have most of those songs on the on when you buy it on the PS4 store as a digital. I think they probably still have most of the songs from there, if I'm not wrong. So hopefully they'll like retain the soundtrack. I mean, Tony Hawk's managed to do it, bar like 1 or 2 games. Dialogue's very interesting. Obviously, like it's 20 years on from GTA. The world has changed. Society has changed. Is everything going to fly? It was always satire, wasn't it? It was always like quite tongue in cheek. But did it really cross the line at any point? And would they feel the need to edit that?
Hopefully not.
You want the raw,
yes,
unfurnished package of the GTA trilogy.
I don't think it needs to be changed.
In terms of talking about the soundtrack, just to double back a little bit, I wouldn't necessarily blame Rockstar for not wanting to pay for the royalties, because as you all know, these record labels and everything, rights holders charge an insane amount to use music. I can't really, especially if they know it's for a game, for something like a project like this, that they're like, oh, here, they want like a truckload of money and then some. I can't really fully blame Rockstar for being like, no. So
graphically, just going back to graphics, I think it is interesting what they've decided to do, because obviously GTA 3 couldn't achieve realistic graphics, when was it? 2001 when it came out, 2001, 2002. So they went for a very stylized type of graphics, and they've seemed to try to keep as much of that as sort of possible and sort of update it. And I thought that's probably the stuff they would sort of try and improve upon, and it doesn't look like they have. It looks like they've tried to sort of keep it truer to the original trilogy. Do you guys think it looks good?
To me, it looks like how I remember it looking when I originally played it. And that's something I've seen other people commenting, and I think it looks fine. It's definitely not a Grand Theft Auto 5 or Red Dead Redemption 2 style, but I think it's acceptable. For $60, I can see both ways why someone would want to pay that and why someone wouldn't want to pay that. So that just depends on personal preference. But I am kind of interested in seeing what they added, removed, and whatnot.
Graphically, I think it looks okay. I'm fine with the changes they've made. The there had better not be DLC for it.
There's going to be loot boxes. What are you talking about?
As far as the soundtracks, I'm being realistic about Vice City and San Andreas. I mean, if they have to get new music, if it's new music, like for Vice City, if it's new 80s music, so if they don't get Iron Maiden and they get like Metallica or Slayer instead, I would be okay with that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a fair shout. If there was I think people would still be upset. I mean, Vice City and San Andreas, probably two of the best soundtracks in video game, in the last 30 years of video games. But is it realistic? We will see. It's coming out quite soon, isn't it? It's coming out on the 11th of November, I want to say.
Digital is November 11th, and then the physical version, I think, is the 6th of December.
Oh,
it's a bit later.
Christmas.
Yeah.
Well, guys, you know what to get me.
More beer?
All right, with that said, we're going to move on to our main section of the podcast. And this week we are talking about Deadly Premonition. Before we get into talking about Deadly Premonition, it's worth noting that this is going to be a two-parter episode. Turns out Deadly Premonition is quite a long game. So we're going to split it into two parts, and the second episode will be coming out on the 15th of November. So we're going to have 2 episodes a month going forward on the 15th and the 29th of each month. It's also worth noting that if you haven't played Deadly Premonition yet, pause it. This is your chance, because we are going to be spoiling the heck out of it. All right, let's get on with it. It's the time we've all been waiting for. In honour of Halloween, we have played Deadly Premonition, for better or worse.
The scariest game I've ever played. No, not really.
Well, I mean, yeah, let's discuss this for a moment. So I think we all came together as a group and decided to respect my fear of anything marginally scary. Because there were a few suggestions, and I think, Neil, you suggested I might find Deadly Premonition a little more bearable than most horror games.
For the record, I was fighting for Fatal Frame, but Jamie said Japanese girl, haunted house, no thanks.
Well, for the record, I also wanted Fatal Frame, but Jamie said he couldn't take anything that was too scary, so I figured Deadly Premonition would at least break up the scares with some humor.
So that's either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your tastes, but we've ended up on Deadly Premonition. So it's obviously a cult classic. It kind of has that sort of cheesy, it's so good, it's bad reputation with a lot of its audience. Who wants to give the elevator pitch for what Deadly Premonition is?
Deadly Premonition is a action-adventure / horror game. Let's say mostly inspired by Twin Peaks. Released for the Xbox 360 to not so much acclaim at first, but then quickly really caught on and gained a little cult following pretty quickly. A pretty terrible PC port, and it was ported to the PS3 and recently to the Switch, and recently had a secret released.
Yes, and it's the director's cut that we are playing, the PS3 version of Deadly Premonition. I think it's quite hard to gain a sort of view of how successful the game was. I've got a quote from Swery, the director and writer, just before the director's cut came out, that so far there's no economic success for this game, which is quite damning. But I think it sold 50,000 units in the US in the first 3 months.
When it was released as a budget title for the Xbox 360, so it was like $20. And, funny story, it was a system set for me to buy the Xbox 360 because I heard about this game.
Wow.
And I read a glowing IGN review. Actually, it was a pretty terrible, awful review from IGN, US at least, that just tore the game to shreds and just got everything wrong about it. They just did not get it at all.
Do you know what? I've got that quote here. IGN said that the game is awful in nearly every way. The Twin Peaks meets Resident Evil with a dash of Grand Theft Auto formula sounds pretty good, but it was well beyond the capabilities of the development team. terrible controls, terrible pacing, terrible sound effects, terrible visuals. And they gave that 20%. Destructoid, Tony's shaking his head.
Destructoid gave it 100%.
100%. So, I mean, you know, pretty high regard. Let's have a look at what they said. They said, there is absolutely nothing in this industry that can be compared with how weird and wonderful the whole experience is. Judged as a piece of entertainment, as a game that consistently surprises and amazes and leaves the jaw hanging, I have no choice but to say Deadly Premonition goes above and beyond. This game is so bad that it's not just become good, it's pretty close to perfect. 100% there from Destructoid. Which, just from the offset, which side are you leaning towards there?
Well, it's funny because when I was looking at reviews, those were the two that I remembered when the game came out for the 360.
Oh, wow.
I specifically remember those two reviews. And because I took a look at reviews today, and if you look at most of the reviews that you can find, most of them are like 7.5 out of 10. So most of them are kind of in the middle. And it's just that there are a few that are on the...
Yes, and I think in general, this game did kind of polarize a lot of people. A lot of people just thought, you know, we'll go into it more, but like graphically, gameplay-wise, it was lacking. Some people just sort of saw it as a quite sort of Pulp Fiction-esque kind of popular culture kind of goldmine. Would either of you like to guess what the average Metacritic rating was for this game?
I'd say a 7 or a 7.5.
I would say like somewhere in the middle, I would assume.
So where are you going for, T?
Like a 6 or a 7.
It got 68 as a Metacritic.
Yeah, that sounds about right, I would say.
For you'd give it a 68?
I enjoyed it immensely for various reasons. So I'd give it about like a 7 or 8 just because I enjoyed it. I enjoy bad games, even though I don't think it's that bad, but there are some awful, terrible design flaws. But like going back to the IGN review, I felt like when I read it, it felt like they were jumping to the gun to just destroy it ahead of everybody else, and then it ended up backfiring because it actually did, you know, a lot of people warmed up to it, you know, in the end. So it felt like it was just a forced review. They just wanted to destroy just to destroy it, and in the end, you know, we got, you know, a little cult classic out of it. So
yes, I wonder today. Obviously, Deadly Premonition 2 came out last year, and there's a sort of a different understanding of Deadly Premonition 1 in sort of 2021. So I wonder if they would sort of still view it that way. But it didn't always start off life as Deadly Premonition. Who wants to talk about the sort of early development cycle of this game?
Well, Rainy Woods, it started out as Rainy Woods, and that began in fall 2004. Work began on it in fall 2004. The trailer for it was initially released in 2007, and it stars FBI Special Agent David Young Henning. So we still have the three-name trope, I guess. Rainy Woods was cancelled soon after its debut trailer. I guess Swery took over the IP and then sort of started work in 2008, and then work on the development began in March 2009.
Let's just take that moment there, because I think we've all seen the Rainy Woods trailer, and I would not... He seemed to say that game was completely cancelled, and we're starting development on Deadly Premonition, a new game. And I think it's quite obvious to see that Rainy Woods is most of what Deadly Premonition is. I mean, the cutscenes are literally the same with the main character model changed out. So I think there's a lot of suspicion about why that might have been done, why he might have said that one was cancelled. But I think one theory that is prevalent is that maybe there was too much of a connection to Twin Peaks. Tony, can you speak on that?
I watched a short little video about the speculation, and there was an interview with Jeff Kramer, and he stated that he recorded all of his lines for Rainy Woods, but then they called him back sometime later to re-record some lines, and some things were, you know, like they changed his name of the main character. they changed the character model of George Woodman because it looked a little bit, speculation is, it looked a little bit too close to Harry Truman, which is the sheriff from Twin Peaks. So the speculation was, it looked a little too similar to Twin Peaks, and maybe they got cold feet, or there was some legal action to where they had to go back and change some things. Otherwise, I think he said that the game was pretty much the same, but I'm wondering if there's a beta build out there that has a little bit more.
I bet there is.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is somewhere uncovered. So, Rainy Woods is cancelled. It's cancelled in air quotes. Deadly Premonition starts development.
It wasn't originally released as a multi-platform game? Original intention?
It did release on the PS3.
No, I mean, I think originally it was supposed to release like earlier in the life cycle of the generation, and I think it was a multi-platform game.
I think originally it was even going to be on the PS2, because that's when, but I think development was kind of, it seemed stretched and a bit frictionless, and ended up going out on the Xbox 360 in America, but it did release on the PS3 in Japan on 2010.
Yes, it was called Red Seed's Profile. I have a copy of it.
No, you don't.
I do.
Why do you have a copy of it?
Because that's the only way to get the PS3 at one point.
Right. At that time, I was living overseas, and I only had a PS3 because the PS3 was region free, and I spotted Red Seed's Profile, and it was a secondhand copy, and it was like $20. So I bought it and played through it in Japanese because it was the only way I could play it.
And did that have English subtitles, or I suppose it didn't have English voice acting?
Had English voice acting.
It had English voice acting, but I'm trying to remember. The subtitles were in Japanese, and I can't remember if the menus were in English or not.
I almost was going to import it at one point because I think I got rid of my 360 at some point, and I wanted the game again, or I just wanted to get it. I don't remember how I wanted to get it. I was thinking I wanted to get it for the PS3, and I was ready to import it, and I read that like it was all in Japanese besides the voice acting, and I was like, I'll wait for it to. I was waiting for it to get ported brought here at some point, which it did, but I never bought it.
Like Tony, Deadly Premonition was one of the games that prompted me to buy a 360, and so
Deadly Premonition selling 360s all over the place back in the day.
Yeah,
it sounds.
It's crazy. And then so I played it on the 360, and then I was overseas, saw Red Seed's Profile, and I was like, it was cheap, so I was just like, I might as well get it.
Let's get the record straight. It's not one of the games that got me to the 360. It is the game that made me go out and buy an Xbox 360. Just having Mass Effects and Alan Wake and all those other games, which is a bonus for me. Even though I don't think Alan Wake was out by that time, but no, there's other games I want to check out, but let's just get the record straight. I bought a fucking 360 for this goddamn game.
It's funny you bring up Alan Wake, because Alan Wake came out the same year, and so Deadly Premonition came out in February of 2010. Alan Wake came out like 6 months later, I think. And there is a point when we get to it, when we start talking about the plot, I do want to bring up Alan Wake briefly, because there's a comparison I want to make.
And Alan Wake is yet another game inspired by Twin Peaks.
So, even before you get into the game, we're hit with our first cutscene of two twins, Isaac and Isaiah, and they're in the woods, and they discover Anagram's body tied to a tree. Is it tied to a tree? Or she's kind of like tied to a tree. At this point, I'm thinking there's like loads of, it's going hard on biblical references here. We've got Isaac and Isaiah, two sort of names from the Bible. You've got her pretty much in a cross formation. She's cut open. What was your first impressions when you saw that cutscene? Were you like, here we go, I'm in for a good game?
I just remember when it goes to, I think it's Anna's mother, and she's hysterically crying and it's so over the top, I started laughing.
Yes, and that's probably not the intention of the game, but you do get a lot of those moments in there.
Yes.
It's very, very campy, maybe not intentionally so, but like guys, like, the Twin Peaks, callback kind of, because Twin Peaks is a very campy, very over-the-top series where there's obviously that kind of scene in Twin Peaks when the parents find out that Laura Palmer was murdered, they're devastated, and it's very dramatic. It's very emotional. The entire town is shook. Similar in this, everyone's shook. But yeah, it's very silly. So it's very, so it's kind of like that. But that scene probably wasn't supposed to be funny.
At this point, I'm kind of in here. And then we get our first cutscene at the beginning of the game. Neil, do you want to talk us through that?
So we see a little girl, and she walks into her room, and she's talking to somebody and says that she wants to hear a story. We hear somebody talking, and we hear a very bad old man voice. And he says to the girl that this is an important story, but a little scary. I don't know why he would tell her this story, now that I think about it.
Here's the story about this gratuitous murder, my grandchild.
Would you like a multiple homicide investigation case to go to bed? Yes, please.
But there is one important thing, because we first hear the quote, "At times we must purge things from this world because they should not exist, even if it means losing someone that you love," which is an important quote in the game.
Yes, and it becomes that's kind of the through theme of this game, and will come up several times as we go through it. But I thought, when I saw that, I was like, okay, yeah, a nice little framing device. I'm sure that's going to sort of pay off at some point. That is added into the director's cut and isn't in the original.
I don't even think it's in the Switch version either. I need to cut that. This is just exclusive to the director's cut.
And then we get to a cutscene where York is driving. He's talking about sort of former investigations, and he's talking to someone he's calling Zach.
First, he's talking on the phone, and he's talking about two people who are cruel and causing suffer. He's talking about two people. You think it's two people who are causing suffering towards one another, and then it's revealed that he's talking about Tom and Jerry, which made me laugh.
And I think there's a little bit of a theme in there where he's sort of saying, even though Tom obviously hates Jerry, he kind of sort of accepts that his sort of side of it in this sort of kind of abusive relationship. And then shortly after that, he starts talking to someone who he has, like the only person he has a relationship with, which seems to be this person that he's invented called Zach.
I've never thought about that before, actually. That's a good analogy, or a good comparison.
We're not told much about Zach at this moment. And what are you thinking when you first hear him? He puts his sort of hands to his ears as if he's like talking on a sort of earpiece, and he's talking to what we can only assume is his imaginary friend at this point. So what are you guys thinking?
I mean, I thought it was all very quirky and funny. So, I mean, I kind of took it for what it was, you know.
And we don't get much time with that until he crashes because he sees a raincoat figure standing in the middle of the road. Something probably that you'd see out of like a sort of 90s slasher film, like I Know What You Did Last Summer, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then he wakes up and we get our first bit of gameplay. Now, the first bit of gameplay is like a really linear pathway through what seems to be some sort of shadow world. What are your first impressions of this?
It was very kind of similar to the style of Resident Evil 4. I think the PS3 version, I was playing I replayed the PS3 version, and from my recall, I think there were some minor tweaks and improvements to the overall gameplay for the PS3 version, so I don't really remember how badly it may not have controlled on 360 since it's been so long, but I didn't have any real problems with aiming or anything.
What about you, Neil?
It's a fairly good introduction in that it sort of gives you a guide on what you need to do. It has very light puzzles, so you can get through it without it being too taxing. You know, you learn the shooting mechanics. You understand what the enemies are going to be like. It's a fairly good introduction, I think.
I think in that terms, you're dead on. In fact, I judge it quite harshly, so I've forgotten that actually it is teaching you the sort of fundamentals of the game. I really think, I mean, obviously the story is something that sort of draws people in, and they start with this story that kind of teases you a little bit, and it's like, okay, let's find out more about this world, and then they lead on to that with their sort of weakest element of the game for me, which is the combat. You wake up next to this car, Also, like the grass was like going absolutely mad. That's probably the worst this game ever looks, is the first time you take control on the analog sticks. I'm seeing this grass, which like the textures are kind of like flickering. It looks like a CRT TV from the 90s on a static channel. And then I'm going through finding these zombies, which are interesting to say the least. I'm sure we'll talk about them. And yeah, it's obviously this quite janky gameplay. And I'm thinking, oh, I really shouldn't have stood up so much for this game. I'm nearly messaging you guys going, I'm sorry. I pushed through with Deadly Premonition.
It is a little bit of a vegetables before your dessert thing in that, you know what I mean? Like, you have to learn the mechanics of the game. And I mean, they could have done something more horrible, like put you in the, did you ever go to the shooting range in the police station? It's in the basement.
I think I went to it, but I didn't use it.
I'd rather learn the mechanics in a way where you're actually facing enemies than having to go through a really boring training level. So if they're going to do it, I'd rather they do it the way they did.
We meet the Raincoat Killer again, and you sort of do a quick time event. It was the 2010s, you know, those were all the rage, to sort of escape him. And then he does a little naughty, sort of gesture at you, a wiggle of the finger, and then buggers off.
That was the quickest quick time event I've ever experienced in my life in any game, because I felt almost all of them. Like when you initially approach him, I always felt them, so I always had to like wiggle the stick to get free of them, because I just could not respond fast enough.
It's one of the only unforgiving parts of this game, are the quick time events I found.
Agreed.
And then you come out of that into, it really feels like literally you're coming out of this tiny, narrow, sort of horrible shadow world path, and you sort of open up onto a bridge and you're in the world of Greenvale. And I really felt that relief. It literally was like the sun was dawning when I sort of came out there. And then we shortly meet on the bridge the two characters who you're meeting, the sheriff. And you meet Emily first. What were our first impressions of Emily?
That cutscene, we meet Emily, and you have this beautiful cutscene of the lake where it kind of looks like it was drawn in MS Paint. Thankfully, things improved after that.
This game came out in 2010, and that's quite late for how this game looked. I mean, what came out in 2010? Red Dead Redemption, Mass Effect 2, Super Mario Galaxy 2, God of War 3, Bioshock. Games were pretty good by 2010, and we're getting this very, I mean, what a lot of people are like calling a sort of PS2 graphics game.
I would say that looked bad for even PS2 standards.
Yes, and I think you're right. Like, also, the further through I got in this game, the sort of less I cared about the graphics, because you are sort of getting you are getting absorbed in this world. But yes, we meet Emily. Emily's obviously supposed to be this quite sort of pure, sort of head on her shoulders kind of female lead in this. And then we meet George Woodman. And I realise at this point that every name is just going to be a very on-the-nose reference to what that character is. I mean, George Woodman, he's like a sort of really simple, salt of the earth, from a small town sheriff, like a man's man. And once you start seeing that, like every single name in this game is, it's pretty obvious reference to like one of the characters. But yes, we've met these two characters. Is anything sticking out at this point?
Yes, I have one thing that sticks out, because Emily looks exactly like Naomi Watts, the actress who she was in King Kong. She was in a David Lynch movie. So there's a David Lynch connection.
She was a main character in Mulholland Drive, which was originally, from what speculation and rumors again, was originally supposed to be a spin-off vehicle for Audrey Horne, who was a character in Twin Peaks, and then he later was filmed as a pilot. Then the pilot never get picked up, and then blah blah blah. He made Mulholland Drive.
So I think what we're learning throughout is Swery kind of holds his influences quite to the front of his work. He's not worried about imitation being the best form of flattery, really. We meet them both, and then we go back to our hotel, and then we're just sort of shunted into a dream sequence where we see a young boy, and we're in this kind of weird red sort of shadowy world, and there's a zombie there, and we're sort of taught to the boy teaches us to hold our breath, and then we can pass this sort of undead creature without getting noticed. This pretty much never comes up in the game.
I thought it was going to be used a lot more in the central game. Like, maybe there's too many monsters or whatever, or he loses his gun or something, or they're indestructible, or there's an indestructible like monster or whatever, and you have to sneak by it. Nope, never comes up.
And then we wake up in the hotel, and this is one of my favourite scenes. We meet Polly.
With the oddly similar sounding Super Mario World music. I don't know if everyone caught that.
Yes. So, I mean, music in this game is, like the game itself, I have a lot of opposing opinions to it, but they seem to have like 3 or 4 main standards, and that is some sort of Animal Crossing kind of like sort of RPG theme, which is what we're doing for Polly. If you're in the car, you have a sort of 80s sort of driver influence, sort of jazzy funk music.
I love that music.
Yeah.
I couldn't really hear anything over the motor of the car.
I had to turn the sound effects down so high. The motor is also probably like a 3-second audio clip just repeated, so you're going it's some of the sound effects are maybe not where they put all the money into this game.
So if you buy different cars, you will get different driving music.
Oh, I didn't know that. I never bought a car. I just switched cars. If my car was running out, since there's share with cars like everywhere, I just jumped up a car into another one.
You can buy cars from the general. I think there's actually a side quest to buy your old car, the one that crashed, and
Really?
the music is different for different cars.
Yes, so we meet Polly at what can only be described as an inappropriately long table. And I love the scene. There's a lot of humour in the scene. I really love Polly as like a main character, as a sort of side character. She's sort of very funny, and she's kind of detached from the story. But she's kind of shouting at him, and he's sort of going, "Oh, can we sit closer? Because you're about 18 meters from me." And she's like, "Oh, don't be such a flirt." How did you guys? How did you guys get on with Polly?
It was great. I think it's one of the most famous scenes from the game, just for the fact that it's just the juxtaposition of the two people at the table and the music and,
a great
and the conversation.
Shot, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think it's one of the most famous scenes in the game.
Very charming. Very Twin Pixie, which that's gonna be said a lot. When I could hear her, because sometimes the music would drown out her voice, but thank God there were subtitles. Very enjoyable characters. All the characters in the game are enjoyable.
It's really character focused, isn't it? And you're right about the mix. Like, the mix is awful. In fact, it really comes up when you're driving in a car, you have a limit of, I think, 50 miles an hour. It is really slow. It's like punishingly slow. And
there's 50 miles per hour, and then there's 50 miles per hour, and then you can speed up, which is a speed difference at all.
Yes, you can go up to 55 miles an hour if you are willing to put on your sirens by pressing L2. And that is a horrible sound. I mean, that siren is really punishing. And I think the game's trying to sort of test you. It's trying to go, how much uncomfortable stimulus are you willing to put up with so that you can go 5 miles quicker?
So if you buy different cars
yes.
from the general, you can go faster than 50.
Oh my God. I feel like I've missed a lot of this game.
There's also a side quest, which I think I missed it. I'll try to go back and do it, and I couldn't find it, where you can actually get fast travel.
And there's lots of things you can acquire with the side quests. I mean, let's talk about that for a little minute. I didn't go too much into the side quests, but there are lots of things you can get: extra guns, unlimited ammo guns. You can get a lot more of the story. Who did either of you go into any of the side quests?
I did some of them. I did the Bones side quest for the first time, which is quite easy. I mean, they're on the map. You can see where they are. If you get all the bones, we're skipping ahead a bit, but Willie the dog will take them from you. And then I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to look through this whole town to find them. And then you meet Forrest and at the diner later, and you can just go to his truck, and the bones are in Willie's doghouse in the back of the truck, and you'll get the bones back, and then you'll get also a Magnum with unlimited ammo, and nice. It helps. Yes. And then there are a couple of I guess you'd call them like challenge rooms, I guess, for lack of a better term, and I think there's A and B, and if you go into them and they're just rooms of zombies, and you just go back and forth, and if you complete a certain amount of rooms, they will give you weapons with unlimited ammo, like a shotgun and a machine gun. So by the end of the game, I was very powerful.
I think it seems really rewarding, not only for what you get at the end of these side quests, from what I've read and seen, but also just those little extra bits of plot that are making this town sort of a more living, breathing thing. Mm-hmm. Things that you don't need to know, but kind of just sort of flesh it out, which is quite impressive, really.
I wish I'd done more of them, actually.
But back at the hotel with Polly, I think there's only one more thing that happens of note there, which is
coffee.
York looks in his coffee and he sees FK.
FK in the coffee.
Like, there are a lot of things that are going to get uncovered in this game, and they are not particularly subtle about it, and I never saw one of them coming.
And let's say the coffee bit, again, another callback to Agent Cooper. He loved to have a damn fine cup of coffee.
He has a coffee obsession. We all love our coffee in the morning, but this guy seems to have an intimate relationship with coffee. But yes, so he sees FK in his coffee. Anyone thinking, I know this is not your first run through, is it, Tony or Neal? Had you both played the game before?
Yes.
Like I said, we both played on 360. I forgot a lot of the major beats of the plot, so I knew a few things. I forgot a lot of others because it's been like 8 years since I played it. So, if not more, so just a few things. It's like, oh, I forgot that's happened. So there's still a few surprises.
I mean, I had forgotten a fair amount of it. So I played it on the 360 when it came out, and I played it on the PS3, the Director's Cut, when it came out, and I played it this time on the Switch just a couple of weeks ago. And I had forgotten a lot, but I mean, most of the main beats I remembered.
Okay, so we've seen FK in the coffee, and I'm thinking, that's probably something, isn't it? And then we get to meet Thomas in the police station. I think there's two things to sort of note about this. Thomas is obviously sort of overly characterized as a sort of a camp character. I think even York calls him the sort of quiet and sensitive type. And at this point, I'm thinking, oh, please don't be sort of a 2010s sort of homophobic. But we can sort of get on to sort of stuff like that later. But I was also thinking from the get-go, it's this guy. It's Thomas. And in fact...
Were you?
I think I suspected him because he seemed like quite a nervous character. And I thought, well, that's the character you're going to least suspect, isn't it? But I had my eye on him from that point. And then he asked us to find him a squirrel key. And not just any squirrel key, a southern flying squirrel key. There's a lot of squirrels out there, apparently, and I went through every other key before I found that squirrel key. Did you guys do the same?
He tells you everything about squirrels.
He's like, don't you know about every type of squirrel and their characteristics?
Do you not have squirrels in England?
We do have squirrels. I do not have an encyclopedic knowledge of squirrels. And I think this point can only serves as like a bit of humour and maybe a sort of reference to a sort of small town. Obviously, York has come from the FBI, metropolitan city, and there seems to be a juxtaposition between that and sort of small town life. By the time I got to the fifth key, I was like, why are you not just holding all these keys in one place? This is a sheriff's office.
There was 5 keys. I found like 2, and I purposely found them because I like the character. He's, again, Twin Peaks, very, not so much similar, but similar to the sheriff's deputy Andy in Twin Peaks. Kind of a nervous, nilly kind of, cut character, goofy.
It seems like this game from the offset is going to have like a lot of humour, and it isn't going to take itself too seriously when in parts where it doesn't have to.
I mean, given your thing about Thomas, there is that trope of it's always the quiet one.
So we find the key, and then we are off to the hospital to see Anna's body. And in order to sort of liaise with Dr. Usher Johnson, we have to solve the chess puzzle. Anyone get stuck on the chess puzzle?
I would like to make a comment on Usher. the obvious reference to the famous North American rapper, R&B artist. I thought that was hilarious.
I was just surprised that it made a rap reference, because all the other references seem to be like movie and Twin Peaks stuff.
I don't know. It's the first thing that caught me, and I thought it was hilarious. I was just so bold, too. Very bold. The boldest thing next to the very blatant Twin Peaks inspired setting.
But Dr. Usher loves chess, and he takes you through a really simple puzzle where it literally just names chess pieces in an order, and then you have to put it back in that order. At that point, I'm thinking, I'm not going to get stuck on the puzzles in this game.
This was pretty obvious because I just looked at it one time. I was like, okay, so I just need to know the names of all these chess pieces.
So yeah, I don't think puzzles are one of the more sort of challenging elements of this game. And then we meet Anagram. Anagram is another sort of not particularly well hidden name. Anagram, as in like an anagram. Although they keep calling it anagram.
I thought it was a Twin Peaks reference because there's a character called Annie in Twin Peaks, played by Heather Graham. A very young Heather Graham.
Oh,
so
okay.
I thought it was Anagram, Annie. The famous last scene of the second season of Twin Peaks is How's Annie? Or Where's Annie? So I just thought, okay, Anna, Heather Graham, and Anagram. Maybe it was intentional. Maybe it works both ways. Anagram and Annie, Twin Peaks, Heather Graham. So I could see it both ways, but that's the first thing that came to my mind.
But York keeps wanting to call him Anna, and I'm at this point I'm like, York, what you do? Sometimes he calls him Anna, sometimes he calls him Anna. It's definitely Anna. Her name is Anagrams. And they examine her on the table. We find out that Anna's tongue has been bitten off. York comes up with one of his fantastic quotes. There's a lot of quotes for this game, which I think kind of hit this sort of cheesy cult following reason why it's so popular. He sees the tongue being bitten off, and he looks up at George and says, "Are you a passionate man?" Now you're looking at the corpse of a murder victim who has their tongue cut off, and you look up at your at someone and say, "Are you a passionate man?" Is it the right reaction? There seems to be like this sense of lack of social etiquette with York at this point.
Well, I mean, I think he's meant to be like a very socially awkward type of character.
And then we go into our sort of first kind of really long Shadow World sequence.
I thought the one thing I can say, the texture effect of the roots, I thought it looked really cool.
Yes, no, I think there's this, it's kind of like an organic vine kind of woods foresty thing that sort of sprouts up and sort of indicates that you're in this kind of red shadow otherworld. And we go through that, sort of killing a few zombies. At this point, I'm really realising they're all just going to say, "Don't want to die," in a sort of really...
I would say the little zombies or whatever, I think that was the creepiest thing about them is the way, don't kill me, I don't want to die.
I saw you.
Yeah, and that was pretty creepy, and I thought the designs were pretty creepy too. The way they just kind of like bent back and went towards you.
Yes, that was genuinely a little bit horrifying. I think the fact that they are a bit cheesy and they all sort of say "don't want to die" did make it easier for me not to be scared of them, and I took a passion towards them, although they were trying to attack me, so I had to kill them.
I was about to ask if you were scared at this point.
I was not scared at this point. There will be points throughout. So we go through there, and then we meet, we come out of the sort of shadow world, and then we meet Harry Stewart.
So says Mr. Stewart.
What's our first impressions of old Harry?
I just love those little weird mystical characters who tells you riddles, and I like the design that he wore the little mask.
He's got a full gas mask on.
His creepy assistant and everything. I just love the whole getup.
Psycho Mantis. That was my first thought. Psycho Mantis.
Psycho Mantis did come to my mind as well.
Yes, so he's this sort of wealthy entrepreneur who's in a wheelchair and only speaks through a sort of...
like a voice box.
Yes, he speaks through a voice box, and you never hear him speak initially. He's speaking to a surrogate who says everything and ending it with, "So says Mr. Stewart." I'm loving this. I mean, I'm assuming that's quite sort of Twin Peaky as well.
It's very, very David Lynchian vibe with that character. I don't think there's particularly. I don't remember there being. I don't think there's a character exactly like him, but it fit very well with a general character in that in Twin Peaks universe. The whole speaking riddles and everything happens a lot in the series. So, yes.
But we leave the hospital and we go to see the initial crime scene where the twin boys found Anna. And this is, I think, the first time I really noticed the profiling gameplay. I think it's used to a reasonable effect in the game. It kind of helps a little bit of progression. I mean, how did you guys feel about the profiling?
To me, the first one was, you had to go around, you had to search the pieces, it had a strong point. I think the other ones were kind of just like, you went to the next room, you found the piece, and then he profiled, but nothing happens because you can't see the full picture. And it was kind of like repetitious. But I thought the first time around, it was kind of like an adventure game. You look in the book, you look like in the tree to find one thing, and then he profiles it, and then you go around, and, it was a lot more, interactive, I guess, in a sense. There's a lot more to it than just going to the next room and opening a drawer and, oh, this is this, and so.
Yes.
I wish there's a little more to it for the other ones, but it is what it is.
It's quite a limited sort of way in which they kind of, I suppose it's better than just telling everything in a cutscene. You're sort of uncovering little bits of a certain moment in the sort of crime scene, and that's coming back as like weird sort of Blair Witch kind of flashbacks. But we learn a little bit about that. Neil, do you want to talk to us about what we gleaned from profiling at the crime scene?
Well, we see something about a giant red tree and a prayer ritual. I mean, this is all in the crime scene. I don't know if it's all in the profiling. We see the upside down peace sign. We see something about a stiletto heel.
Miss Stilettos.
Yes. And then that leads into talk about Diane, and it also leads us to our next set piece, which is the lumber mill.
I love Mrs. Stilettos. That's a fantastic name. And then also York drops this term, which I've never heard before. He uses the term unsub, which is unknown suspect. He only does it for about 3 times at the sort of beginning half of the game.
It's dumb.
Yeah, it's literally like, at this point I'm thinking, is York like an alien that's sort of come to this planet and hasn't really kind of fully worked out? The way he kind of sort of is very curious about this small town and uses phrases that are very weird, and just sort of expects everyone to know what unsub means.
Well, okay, I say it's dumb, but by the same token, like, people who are in a job are going to have specific specific terms and specific lingo for their job that they will know that other people won't. So
but
it would.
Do you think unsub is one of them? Do you think the
no?
FBI are going after?
No, but I mean, given that he seems to work a lot of cases by himself, I can see him using that term in cases for himself.
Yes, and to be honest, it does endear me towards him more than anything. We find a bit of scrap material that leads us to the lumber mill.
Okay, so we get to the lumber mill and we go into another Otherworld section. This one is much longer. I don't know how you guys felt about the Otherworld sections in general. I think some of the earlier ones are better just because they're a little more truncated. This one isn't too bad, I guess. We have another encounter with the Raincoat Killer. This is where we hold our breath. We do find hair, I think a fingernail, and a piece of raincoat. And then when we get out, we talk to George and Emily, and George explains the legend of the Raincoat Killer. This is our first indication of that. And then York has George and Emily show him their backs because of the upside down peace symbol.
Yes, so he's found a photo of an upside down peace symbol on someone's back, deciphered that the killer is going to have this symbol on their back.
Wasn't it like pouring rain outside too, and they're over there like taking their clothes off? They're standing in the rain talking to each other a lot in this game. And
George is like, you can't ask Emily to take her back off, she's a woman. And then she's like, no, I'm fine. Pops her top off. she hasn't got any tattoos. She's fine. George uncovers his top, full of sort of quite unpleasant scars all over his back. And he's like, I don't really want to talk about it. It's personal.
He says, it's personal to me the way Zach is personal to you, which shuts York down immediately, which was quite smart.
Yeah, very fair.
In fact, at some just after that, or just before that, he goes, York goes, don't ask me about Zach. I mean, as people like George and Emily must be going, like, who is this guy? He's talking literally to what seems like his imaginary friend. But just going back to the Otherworld sequence, this is the first time we see like a lot of mechanics in the game. We see, as you said, the holding your breath, hiding in a sort of small locker sequence, and that happens throughout the game like a few times. When this first started, I thought this is going to be, it seemed really tense because you get the split screen, you see what the killer's doing, and a sort of outside view. There's a really clever way they've implemented a sort of trope that you do get a lot in horror films, that moment where you're hiding from the killer in a locker, in a closet, but you're actually playing it. And I thought initially what you was going to have to do, because you're seeing where the killer's going, is that you were going to have to run out at a moment where he was sort of distracted. Sadly, that doesn't happen. And what happens is you just have to press R to quick enough for like certain segments of when he's looking.
I remember I actually thought the same thing. I'm like, okay, I'll get out from here and I'll run. Because of course, naturally, it's been like 10 years since I played it. I forgot about the sequence. Nope, I got murdered. I'm like, then why did he say... at one point, if you try to like get out, he's like, oh, I can't. The killer's here. I'm like, then why give me the option to get out if I'm just going to get slaughtered? And besides, I always hid under like a bed. I heard the worst spot possible, and he's literally walking by me. I'm like, under a desk, and you can see York under the desk like bro.
He is not the best looker, the killer.
He's not very good at hide and seek.
No, but you're exactly right about the split screen, though. It's a really good way to increase tension in the game and making you think you're going to be found.
Yes, it's really effective at that. It's a genuinely really tense moment in the game. At least the first time it happens.
There was a mechanic that was also kind of popular in a few indie games at the time. Amnesia is very similar to Amnesia in a sense that I thought it was going to kind of be like that too, where you have to hide and then run and then hide again. But again, it's another mechanic that kind of is just kind of there. Kind of feels like filler after the fourth time you do it.
Now that I think about it, is this the first time that it has the mechanic where you are running away from him and he's chasing you?
Yes. So shortly after, he looks for you terribly in a locker, and every time you breathe out, you go, whew, in a sort of a weird way, and then the killer goes, Aah! And he leaves the room, and then shortly after, you have your first chase sequence. This is a bit where I'm preparing myself. Okay, this is going to be horrible. This is the bit I'm going to have to sort of put my hand over my face and sort of look through. The way they've implemented it, not that scary.
The on-rails chasing that you can get stuck.
Because of the boxes. Oh, God, it was frustrating.
Push the boxes. I'm like, why doesn't he just walk around the boxes? There's plenty of space.
But luckily, the Raincoat Killer is not only terrible at looking for things, he's terrible at like following someone at a snail's pace. So you're there literally wiggling the left analog
control
stick,
sticks, yeah,
back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then you might get to an obstacle like a stack of crates, which is a whole animation in itself. So you have to press X, really slowly get onto the crates, run a little, slowly get back off, evade him once in a while.
I just remember one thing that I thought was hilarious. You had to push a box until the box exploded. Because it was simulating that you were hitting it and you were pushing it, and I'm like, just walk around the box. Come on.
Yes, in the world of Deadly Premonition, pushing a box for about 6 slow tugs is enough to completely destroy a box, which I only found slightly less preferable to shooting it about 5 times.
Or walking around it, because you have all this space to the right, York, but you're deciding to just push it for like halfway through the building.
And I just didn't use that. I never shot anything to get resources. I know sometimes you could find food or other things that were like ammo that was useful, and I just thought it's not worth it. The game's never pushing me that much. Although people sort of describe it as a sort of survival horror, I don't think they were really leaning into any sort of survival elements too much. I don't think that's what they were kind of wanting to achieve from this game.
I think you had to eat and sleep, and I'm not sure what happens. I just always drink coffee and eat snacks.
you have a food meter and you have a sleep meter, and as those deplete, you need to sort of fill them up. Did anyone actually like feel the need to be more? They seem to go down very slowly, and it was quite easy to sort of boost them up. I think it's just another example of this game just sort of throwing everything at the wall. It had a lot of ideas, this game, and it sort of threw them all, and maybe some were less well implemented than others.
Well, food goes down when you sleep. Now that I think about it, we can go off on a tangent because you get rewarded for doing a lot of things. Like saving, you get rewarded.
Oh yeah, you save your game and they give you like $50.
I thought it was costing me money. Was it giving me money for saving?
No, if you go to the payphones, it costs you money.
Okay,
but at the same time, you can use the payphone and it'll give you $20 for saving.
Yeah, you can save in certain spots, and it doesn't, as long as it's not a payphone, it doesn't cost you, and you get money for being, I think it's called Daily Reporter. You get money for shaving. You get money, I think, for showering and changing your clothes.
So that's another two things that happen, like the eating and sleeping. There are two other things you can do. You can change your clothes and clean them, and you can shave. And the first time I had an option to shave, I shaved. And then I thought, why have I done that? Only later did I realise that you actually do grow facial hair and a beard if you don't shave long enough in this game.
I played him with a beard.
I played with a beard as well. I think I shaved one time, and I was like, I'm like, how long is this beard going to get? Is it going to get like, Rob Zombie kind of full, disgusting, scruffy beard, or is this going to be like a regular beard? It was a regular beard.
Did anybody not shower or not change their clothes?
Can you shower? I think you can clean your clothes. I'm not sure if you can clean yourself, can you?
Well, you can shower.
Oh, can you?
I change my clothes every once in a while. Like every chapter, I put on a different set of clothes, just for variety's sakes.
If you go long enough without showering or without changing your clothes, you will actually start to lose money. You will get penalized, and you will get flies buzzing around you.
Yeah, so I got to about halfway through this game, and I thought, are flies like a theme in this game? Is there like a weird thing as you're going, why are there so many? And it starts as a few, and then suddenly, like, everywhere you go, there's like loads of flies. And I thought, this is a really weird game choice. And I thought, you can clean your clothes. And I cleaned my clothes, and lo and behold, I was fly free. But I quite like those. I thought that was like, unlike the actual sort of two things that seem really important, like eating and sleeping, that seem like literally on your pause menu, I thought that shaving and sort of not washing was quite well implemented within the game. So we've been to the lumber mill, we've had a look at George and Emily's backs, and then we decide to hold a town meeting in the town centre, which has this massive clock tower, which we're sort of very impressed with upon first meeting. And this starts with a cutscene with him addressing the town. One thing I did notice is before this scene, but when it's on your schedule to happen, if you get out of the car, you often go, or I think even in the car, you're often going, I'm going to talk publicly to all these people. That's really exciting, York. And I think, or Zach, sorry. And I think it's just another example of him like really missing the point and having this sort of social unawareness. He's like really excited to sort of talk to the townspeople about basically this homicide that's gone on. As if he was kind of in the year 6 nativity play. But yeah, so he meets the town. He warns them not to go out in the rain. We get to see Harry Stewart again, who again sort of brings this biblical reference of Anna has died for the sins of the town. Is it Carol that walks in? Carol walks in.
Carol walks in.
Yes, with some notable stiletto heels. You have your chat. Carol is the sister of Thomas. And after you've addressed the audience, you're then free to wander around the theatre. One of the first people that you encounter on stage is Thomas, and you ask to have a look at Thomas's back, and Thomas shows his back to you, and he has a Love G tattoo. This is another part where the game is crying out to you to tell you what's going to happen.
Yes.
Anyone think much of Love G at this point?
No,
I
actually.
I forgot a lot of the story beats, so I didn't really think about it. Same thing. So I thought, of course, hindsight, it's pretty cool that, you could solve, it lets you help you. I mean, the player can solve the mystery, or there's enough hints on who you can guess who's a suspect and guess who's innocent. Like, it's cool that there's enough detail there to do actual investigating on your own as a player.
I remember in my first playthrough of this game that I didn't think anything of Love G, and I did not suspect Thomas at all.
Okay. I definitely thought, I think like the FK thing, I thought they're trying to tell us something here, and then I completely blanked it and continued on with the game. And then you get to chat to Stuart. You also get to meet throughout the centre a lot of the people, pretty much most of the townspeople that you can interact with here.
Okay, so we have Becky, Anna's best friend, Brian the Insomniac, the albino who works in the graveyard, Carol,
I like Brian,
Thomas's sister, Diane, Becky's older sister, who is the owner of the art gallery.
Do we meet Diane at this point in the centre?
No, Diane's there because I wrote down everyone I talked to in the theater.
Okay.
So Diane has a bit of a reputation in the town. From the wiki I looked at, it says, Diane is infamous among the women of the town because she is known to be rather open with her love and legs. So Fiona is there with Dr. Usha. We have Gina Rosy Lips, who is the wife of the owner of the gas station, who basically flirts with anything in pants. And I don't know whether you noticed, her jean shorts are actually undone. You can actually see her underwear.
She is very much portrayed as, that's, I think at one point you want to talk about the investigation. She's like, that's like smart stuff, and I don't do smart stuff. I just like sort of makeup and men. So she's not the most sort of deep characterization of a persona. And then her partner, who seems to be Paul Phoenix from Tekken 3.
You know who he looks like? So her husband is Jack, the owner of the gas station. You know who he looks exactly like? Early 2000s Undertaker. Look it up.
I don't remember The Undertaker ever looking like... The Undertaker had like long black hair, didn't he? That sort of dropped down.
Look up Biker Undertaker. He looks exactly like Biker Undertaker.
I think the long hair was like later Undertaker. I think
there's like...
Neil's talking about like the mid 90s Undertaker.
Well, no. Like, I haven't watched wrestling in 20 years, but...
I think I missed that phase of The Undertaker.
Very early 2000s Undertaker looks incredibly similar to Jack.
And they are, so this is one of the only side missions I even sort of entertained. You go up, because you have to refuel anyway.
Oh yes, I did do this one.
You get to what I can only describe as like a crazy taxi-like sort of glowing light that you can kind of go, and you do this to sort of enter most missions, that you drive into and it stops and it starts a cutscene, and you can meet two people. You can you can meet them both, and he offers you hints which are inaudible and go far too fast and you don't sort of catch if you pay him, and she will offer you some sort of flirty banter. Not the most important characters for the game, really.
No, you can look at those hints later though. Like there's a list of you can.
Because they go quick and they are literally in order, and because he's whispering them, isn't he? He's going, "Ugh," and you get like a flash of text, which is like a few sentences, but only a second to read them.
I'm trying to remember. I think he has like his back to you, like he's kind of standing there,
and he kind of spits on your car, and
yes, when he's cleaning it, that's right.
But so who else are we meeting at the town hall?
Who else am I forgetting? So Harry Stewart was there. Jim Green, who we didn't talk about when we talked about Isaac and Isaiah, who is their grandfather.
Yes.
I actually really like his voice actor.
I mean, even though it's quite quirky, there's a lot of good voice acting in this game.
Yes. I think he's one of the more suitable ones. There's Keith Ingram, who is the owner of the Milk Barn, which is he's the little
rockabilly character, right?
Yes.
He like snaps his fingers and everything.
Yes.
He's literally portrayed. So what does a rocker do? He kind of snaps his hands in a kind of jazzy dance 5, 6, 7, 8 kind of way. I don't know if Sweary's ever literally seen like a rock band before, but I think this brings a point to me, which is like a lot of the animations are characterized by quite simple, repetitive movements.
Right.
Which at first sort of feels a bit janky and feels a bit maybe low budget. But then I sort of started looking at it like a sort of like when you get RPGs or like graphic novels like Danganronpa, where the characters only have a few animations to sort of connote like surprised or like scared, and you have like these sort of few visual images of them doing that. As soon as I started seeing it as that and not just like bad graphics, I accepted it a lot more. I think York does one where he kind of points at his chest repetitively, and that sort of happens quite a lot. And as soon as I started thinking of it as like, I think there's a lot of RPG inspiration in this game, then I just didn't mind it at all, really. And you can enjoy it a lot of the time.
Okay, so we have Keith, we have Lily Ingram, who is his wife, and who is the mother of Isaac and Isaiah, although she never interacts with them in the game. She barely does.
I had to look at my notes to remember who she was, because I was like, I have the characters' names. I'm like, Lily, the twins' mom, like, I don't ever remember her being her children.
So there's then we have Lysander the General. He's the dude you can buy the cars from.
I was going to say, this is another moment where I thought, I'm going to learn more about this character later, because I didn't choose to do his side missions. You don't learn about him ever again. You might see him like driving through town, but I was just expecting at some point for him to turn up in the plot, and I think it sort of is a credit to this game that there's actually so much sort of filling out the world that you, unless you go and seek these characters out, you may never find out what they sort of contribute to the narrative.
Yeah, what I found interesting was you only see Anna's mom, Sally, in the opening cutscene.
But again, you can actually go to Anna's mom.
I know. I just thought it was interesting that she wasn't at the town meeting. I thought it was going to be a huge thing, but it's like, yeah, you need a lot of these characters. You have to discover their storylines through side quests and stuff like that. Like, it's not all laid out there for you.
And if you're not going to put that impetus in to do it, then you know, they just won't be a part of your narrative of the game. In fact, you can go to Anna's mum, and that kind of leads on to lots of little side quests where you kind of have this whole other element of what's sort of going on in the story.
Yeah, I think I did some of the first side quests when I originally played it, but like I said, when I played the PS2 version, I kind of just want to get through it because I was having a lot of problems, and I just kind of want to make it to the end.
I didn't do any of hers. I didn't know that she opened any side quests at all.
She literally, like, you can find out about her, and then she sort of brings you on to someone else. But I think basically you can end up going to George's house early and finding this sort of secret passage quite early on in the game. But yeah, so you meet... Who else are you meeting?
So then we have Nick and Olivia who work at the diner. Nick is the chef, and Olivia is basically the waitress. Polly is there. Then we have Quint, who is Becky's boyfriend, who works at his father's bar, the Swery 65, which is named after Swery. Then we have Richard, who is Quint's father and the owner of the bar. He's a master of darts. We have Sally Graham, Anna's mother. Then I have Sigourney, who is a crazy old lady that roams the streets of Greenvale with a pot. And I know that she does side quests, and I couldn't find a way to open it up.
Again, Twin Peaks reference to the log lady.
Yeah, maybe.
Carried a little log.
We can only dream about what happens in our side quests. None of us have graced her presence.
And then the last one we meet, well, Usha is there, but then the last one we meet is Wesley the gunsmith, who gives you access to his gun shop at this point, but he's kind of redundant because you can access the gun shop from anywhere.
Yes, and I was really thankful for that. I think when I saw that it was sort of Resident Evil style, like saving when it comes up in the environment rather than being able to save at any point. And I saw him, I thought, these are just going to be two unnecessary game elements that are just going to add time to the game. But actually, the saves were quite often, and I never sort of noticed it. And yes, just being able to access the gun shop anytime you could save, I was thankful for that more than the realism of actually having to go to his shop.
I also like that you could send some of your items to your little to your item box without having to run to the item box every single time or leaving items behind because you don't have space for them.
Yes, and it's the most obvious Resident Evil. It's one of the most obvious Resident Evil references when you do pick up an item and it has that kind of 3D model of it spinning around and it's going on its own screen. I didn't realise you can quit out that really quickly and sort of skip that animation. Okay, so, I mean, again, a lot's been thrown at you at this point. You've pretty much had 80% of the game mechanics that you're going to encounter, and you've met everyone in a kind of Clue. I think you guys call it Clue, we call it Cluedo, sort of board game kind of way. So you've just given this smorgasbord of characters. And then we have a sort of final scene in the diner. So they say, do you want to come and eat with us in the diner? And you can choose at this point. You can choose not to eat with them or eat with them. I mean, I chose to eat with them.
I did too, because it's so worth it.
Yes. I'm surprised you can sort of miss this out. Is this like additional content for the director's cut, maybe?
I don't think so.
No, it wasn't all of them. There was always an option to skip it, but I mean, I never did.
No, it's a really good scene.
Yes. So they talk about some of the other cases that York has done, and he talks about a killer. I think it was the last case he was on, with a killer who used the skulls of women as utensils. He filled them with cola, rum, and ice and downed it in one gulp. But he would also use the skulls as urine cups. And York viewed him as insane because he drank from the urine cups, and that just wasn't sanitary.
I think that's such a good example of why York misses the point most of the time to what most rational human beings were thinking. It's also quite sweet because before that, Emily's saying, you guys are, York, you're in the FBI, you're just on a different level. Like, the most we deal with is a bit of like kids stealing from the local sweet shop and stuff like that, and this and that. And York says, I don't think it's that different, you know. I had this guy who used women's skulls as utensils. They're all crimes. It's all important, and that's. But he kind of says it in a way that's like quite sweet. Like crime is crime. It's
crime
not
is
like
crime.
There's not like a spectrum, which I think in real life there probably is. But he's kind of validating her as a law official at that point.
Well, then he goes into a law school student who raped 800 victims, and Emily starts to cut him off at this point, and he's like, "I was just about to get to the good part."
I'm really glad Emily cut him off at that point.
I don't know. It's just York is so oblivious to other people and what they think about things, and this is a perfect example of it. And I mean, the topic is so horrific, but I was just laughing through the entire thing. Yes,
I think there's that sort of duality of actually what he's talking about is horrible, but the sort of fact that York doesn't get that's like a shocking thing. I mean, maybe you could argue he's like, I don't know, very socially awkward.
I just think he's like, maybe he's just like so numb, so used to all this, just talking about so openly.
Yes, yeah.
And you're in a small town where the worst thing that happens is, nothing. And then there's this horrible murder here, and he's like, oh, yeah, I saw this guy do this. And they're like, whoa.
Yeah, but it is I think it's shot really well. It's kind of shot from a long angle a lot of the time. And you're seeing him at this diner, and it feels quite humble and sort of warm compared to what we've played up until this point.
It is a nice bonding moment for the four of them.
Yeah, and there is a few of those throughout the game that we'll get to. I think then you go to what happens at the end of most episodes, where he starts typing up his notes about what he's gleaned so far from the investigation. He's doing this from his hotel, and it's a very detective story type of thing to sort of go through and make you recall what happened and ask you questions and try and get you to. Yes, there's a quiz.
There's a quiz.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah.
So, did anyone go like? The most I did is put in one wrong answer, and then it'll go, oh, come on, have a think about this, York. Zach, is quite important. What happens if you fail it twice? Will it just go, pick the other one? Can you fail that section?
I never failed it. I don't know. I mean, they're not...
It probably just says, oh, no, not this one. I think it just makes you eventually pick
gently
the last
pushes
option.
You towards the correct answer.
Yeah.
They're not taxing, so...
No, they're not.
But it's just a very... Because I was playing Last Window, which is the Hotel Dusk sequel, recently, and it does the exact same thing. So it seems to be a kind of trope of like visual novels and detective games and that kind of thing.
Yes, yeah, and you can see the influence there from a lot of media, particularly like American murder mystery TV shows, where that's where he is taking a lot of influence from. Yes, so that is the end of episode 1, and on to episode 2. I think we're going to leave it there for now, and we're going to save the rest for the second part. Again, that's coming out on the 15th of November. We would usually give a conclusion here to how we feel about the game, but obviously we're not going to do that. We're going to save that for the second episode. So I'll leave it to you, Tony, to tell people where they can find us.
Hey there. Did you enjoy the podcast? Well, if you did, we'd like you to join us on an adventure in the future. So please follow us at PS Rumble on Twitter. And also reach out to us for your questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, what have you, by emailing us at PlayStationRumblePodcast@gmail.com. Because some of life's greatest journeys were never pioneered alone. So says Mr. Stewart.
Well, I think that is all from us for now, so it only leaves us to say goodbye.
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 Goodbye. Oh, I figured we'd go to you and then just bring up news in general.
Okay. Would you like to say that again, Tony? Just intro me in.
I don't remember what I said.
And what about you, Tony? Oh, shit.
Upbeat.